What's up, Tater Tots? We are here and ready for part two of my Friday Burns for the week. Make sure you check out our podcast once again. If you have not yet, the episode just came out today, this Friday. Go to all your podcast streaming services for the Parker's Couch to get the latest episode there. Well, I'm going to start this segment off with the unfortunate Jerrod Carmichael. Now I know I told y'all in previous videos. I know many people have jumped off the bandwagon. It's only I think after this, like I think it's two more episodes left, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm just staying to the end. I definitely just want to see the conversation with him and his mom too, which I think is about to come up pretty soon. Kind of see how that goes. But we all know he's a cornball and he's pretty much done this time, especially for the black community. But let's get into episode 5 real quick and review some of that. For a lot of you who are not watching, so you know what has been going on at this point. All right. So in episode 5, we have him with his one of his best friends, I guess, growing up, or one of his good friends who he used to room with and everything, Jamar Neighbors. And Jamar is an interesting character. He definitely has a lot of issues. He grew up in a foster child environment, him and his sister. Their mom gave him away. He doesn't know who his father is, never seen a picture or a photo of his father. You could tell there's a lot of hurt. There's just a lot of issues there in his life. And I can't remember, I don't want to lie and say if he did have drug issues or something. He just kind of gives you that by the way that he acts and stuff, but I can't remember. But this episode to me was so unsettling. I'm like, what are we doing here? So basically, Jamar and there's parts of their relationship where he feels like Jerrod, I guess, was lied to him. I don't know why people feels like that when people come out as gay or anything like that. Like you owe them something. Like, why are you lying to me? Or I've been like you tricked me into having a gay friend and all this stuff. It's just so corny. But this is like his close friend that he grew up with who's very homophobic and is working through that. Or I guess has been working through that homophobia because of their friendship and things of that nature. But he's also the friend who gave Jerrod some of his best, I guess, stand-up advice, as he says, at one point in time, where he told him, like, you're just rushing too much, you need to take your time, that sort of thing. And Jamar is also a comedian, if you want to say that. And Jerrod now wants to return the favor and offer him like advice and bring him on the road with him to help him get better. So in this episode, you go through a lot of uncomfortable moments of Jamar up on stage doing comedy that just isn't funny at all. And it just I was really like, what are we doing? Why are we showcasing him? Like, is this to embarrass him? Is this to make a point? Or I'm really trying to understand what was the point of this episode. Like, if this is supposed to help him, is this just showing a reality of a life? I don't understand the connection of this, and I've been trying to wrap my brain around it. So I was reading some recaps and stuff like that of it as well. And so Jerrod knows all this trauma that he's had in his childhood, how his mother gave him up, and how he hasn't seen a photo of his father. And when he makes that offer for him to come out on the road with him, he pretty much tells him, like, I don't want to do it at first. He was like, I don't want to use comedy as a therapy session. It's like, that's what Jerrod Carmichael does, which is pretty accurate and true. And I get that because, yeah, that's look, you don't want to be Monique, who I just went off on in video one, if you saw. Like, you don't want to be using comedy as a therapy session. And that's why I thought some was a strong suit of Jerrod was like how he did it in a special was like in a unique way, and it was fresh how he did it. But that won't last for me for comedy over time as a whole. Like, you got to tell some jokes. Nobody wants to be that serious all the time going to a comedy show. Those are kind of like one-off moments or like pivotal moments in life, but I don't know. I need to laugh. So he goes out on the road with them. He accepts, and we go through these series of shows where he's like just sitting on stage and he's talking with the audience. Carmichael also makes sure he gets in therapy, so he has him going through therapy sessions, and he's trying to work out stuff with his life and what's happened in that, and then he's trying to share some of these things on the stage and incorporate it within his comedy. And so it's like a kind of like talk back and forth. And I think one of the things that bugs me too is because it's like predominantly like white audiences, and that matters to me in this situation because I'm like, the pictures we are painting of black folks sometimes in these dead and out situations, like, trust me, there is hardships in life, but not every situation is like this. I don't know what we're doing. um and Jamar is like battling, like, he doesn't want to live in what he calls like the victim mentality and doing that all the time and operating in that and stuff in his comedy. But he'd rather just also just shut it off, which also isn't an appropriate response. I go so back and forth with this episode because there's elements of it that is good, where it is talking to you about life and really about, in a real way, how people want to run away from their issues, and a lot of times use laughter as a way to escape those issues or just not to deal with them, and that you have to face these things head on. I feel like this man doesn't need to be on a stage until he goes through therapy and works this stuff out, and then you come to a stage. I don't get doing this, traveling, having cameras around you filming, going through serious therapy, and then trying to get on the stage to tell jokes and think this is going to be effective and think this is helping your friend. Jared, he just has an interesting way of quote unquote helping people. And the more I see this, I just see this whole thing as like using people. Uh, he is just coming off as not a likable person to me in this whole experience of this reality show going on. And here it is, pivotal. Let's see, like, Jamar comes to the conclusion: you have the right to say you hurt me, but I love you. And although he goes into some painful details about his mother not coming to his high school graduation as she promised, he backpedals. If she hadn't done that, I probably wouldn't have had the balls to come to Chicago and do this bitch ass therapy, as he says. And we meet the mother in the apartment and stuff at the end, and you could tell it's just so awkward. It's all this pain and stuff in the room, but then it's all this laughter and stuff where they're trying to disguise it in laughter, which we know this stuff happens in family a lot, and it's kind of capturing some of that awkwardness. I feel like this reality show, I don't know. I tell y'all, I go back and forth because it's elements of awakening that's good, but then it's also elements where I feel like it's exploitive. And I'm having a hard time reconciling that and coming to a firm conclusion. At the end of the episode, there's this pivotal moment where we see the the Jamar and Jerrod, they're out, and he wants him to fly a kite with him. So, and Jamar says, "I'm not flying a kite with no gay ninja." And he gives a half-hearted go after, doing it after a lot of pressure. But ultimately Jamar cannot be as gentle and conscious as one has to be to keep a kite in the air. But he does try to do a series of bat flips across the park. Kite flying and bat flips are our choices, as was said. So They talked about this article talks about that kite scene, and I'm just read this part because it's in the Esquire magazine. And Carmichael, it says Carmichael and I talked about the kite scene when I spoke to him last month. As a man, he said, you're raised just not to do what the girls do in any way. It's hard to shape the idea of that as weakness, to evolve beyond that because it is instilled. It becomes second nature, and I definitely had those fears. He told me a joke he's been telling friends. I came out of the closet and started smiling in pictures. And I said, exactly, so loudly that my Apple Watch gave me the excessive noise warning. I was doing a lot of the masculine hand gestures, the tight fist, and the other hand over it, he continued, because men don't know what to do with their hands. And I just wasn't smiling. I mean, there's truth in some of that. Like the kite part, I never saw kite flying as masculine or feminine. Maybe some people can interpret it that way, but I guess growing up in a beach town, it's like everybody kind of had a kite at some point as a kid or whatever, at least. And then it's like something you do on the beach, like fly a kite and stuff when you're young. But I guess some people I could see that attaching it to some sort of masculinity, femininity thing. And I think this is the real moment of what he's saying. Yeah, like when you're trying to cover up like your sexuality, like you're going to present yourself in a certain way and try to live in these masculine tropes and excuse me, and do that. So that does make sense. So, like I said, it's y'all, I don't know. I'm just here and I'm watching it. I would love anybody who's watching it to kind of get your thoughts on how you felt about the last episode. It was just pretty uncomfortable for me to watch this man struggle the way that he was. I feel like it should be a documentary that we're watching like on Netflix or well, it is on HBO, but like in a I guess like a specific hour and a half documentary series that's a part of something, getting to some conclusion or whatever at the end, like not in a series type thing. I don't know. It's just really odd. But we'll leave that right there where it is with Mr. Carmichael. And let's talk about something else. We'll go from gay to gay. How about that? This was interesting to me. I don't know if y'all saw or if you were fans of Glee before in the past. I actually was working on a thesis regarding Glee at one point, so I definitely was a fan of the show. But if you remember Blaine's character, Darren Criss, he had some interesting comments. He was over in Chicago over the weekend where he called himself, he says, I'm straight, but I'm also culturally queer. So he was at an expo over the weekend in Chicago where he was asked about his starring role as Blaine Anderson in the hit show and what he thought it meant for representation to portray an openly gay character on a major network. And Darren remembers his work on Glee quite fondly, saying it was awesome to play a gay guy and that he's proud he was able to put a spotlight on an underrepresented group. He also said that while he himself is straight and cisgender, he identifies with the LGBTQ plus community regardless, citing his upbringing in San Francisco in the 90s as seminal to his character and identity. Of course, the way he actually framed the sentiment might rub people the wrong way because frankly, what does culturally queer even mean? Which I think is a very fair question. I'm just going to play what he had to say.
We're going to allow these guys to talk about gay shit. I have been so culturally queer my whole life. And not because I'm trying, you know what, actually, I was going to say, not because I'm trying to be cool, but I'm going to erase that. It's because I am trying to be cool. 90% of the shit in my life that I have tried to emulate, learn from, and be inspired by is 100% queer as fuck. That's hundreds of years. It's been from the queer community. These are people that I idolize, that I want to learn something from. And obviously it's a gross generalization, I'm not just, that's a lot of things, a lot of people. But I grew up in San Francisco in the 90s. I watched men die around my uncles were dying. There was an awareness of the gay experience that was not a foreign concept to me. So it was a narrative that I cared deeply about, not because I'm some fucking saint or I have some kind of like, I'm the man for the job. They hired me, and like I've said, I'm in the service industry. They said, you're the guy. I said, okay, if I'm the guy, I will do my best. I'll do my best to talk about it in a way that I believe, in a way that I'm passionate about. So in many ways, I go, I'm glad that it was me because it was a thing that I really liked showing up for, and it meant a great deal to me that it meant a deal to other people. Because when people say that they were affected by that show or that relationship, it's not because of me, man. It's because of that relationship on that TV and the risks that people took to put that on TV. And most importantly of all, it took the people watching it to have the aptitude for seeing beyond what was, maybe given to them in other avenues of culture to go like, okay, you know what, I can relate to this, gay or straight. So I have a lot of people from all kinds of ages that were, from all spectrum of queerness that you're like, that show. I didn't really grow up with a show with like that, and that was a really meaningful thing for me to see. And I go, I didn't grow up with a show like that. That would have been very meaningful for me too. Regardless of the fact that I'm a straight kid, that has value. Show representing any kind of underdog, as we all know, in any way, shape, or form, sexual, religious, theological, ethnic, whatever. It has value because there's going to be a lot of people that see that and go, okay, I can now understand this in a context that maybe I didn't.
All right. So that was quite interesting because Glee was definitely an impactful show. I mean, it did a lot for, even though it doesn't cover everything, one show can be any and everything. And there are a lot of layers and things missing. However, for what it was and what it did, despite its issues, and I could do that on another thing to go into the issues and stuff, because I was writing a thesis on this with a critical kind of critique of queerness and stuff on Glee. It definitely was monumental in representation and things that it brought in front of the TV screen. I think the good far outweighed the bad, in my opinion, for what Glee did. Now he's saying some of the quiet parts out loud here, like, yeah, like culturally queer, and he's saying that to be cool in a way. So it's this odd thing, and it bugs me because queer culture is sought after. Like, on one hand, people want to despise it, but then they want to seek it. Like, for instance, you'll have like all people saying, "Oh, all these painted nails and wearing these bags and da 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 da." Have all these critiques to say. If you saw in the video, Darren had painted nails as a straight cisgender guy. And then there's so many people now who paint their nails, that's hilarious. And it's providing like such an interesting critique. But you have all these people go in and all this stuff at queer culture. But then at the same time, they turn around and then you hear people talking about, oh, we just having a kiki, or you hear people just using all sorts of queer language. Like, queer culture just drives so much stuff within the culture. It wants to be bashed on one hand, but then people want to adapt and use the culture on the other hand in so many ways. And I think people use it and don't even know where things are coming from sometimes. It's like, oh no, that came from a queer person, right? That was developed by a queer person, that what you're using right there. You might think that you came up with that, but no, it wasn't. So that's just always so interesting to me how that happens. So I've been trying to wrestle, what is culturally queer? Like, what does that mean when somebody comes out? I just don't know if this was the appropriate way for him to phrase it, because I think it's okay to be a straight person and play a queer person. That's okay. I don't think it has to be reserved for just a queer person. Now, I think if there was like a nonfiction story, and if it was someone who was really queer in real life, I think that should be played by a queer person. Absolutely. But I don't think just overall, like, you're an actor. So yeah, you can play different roles. And I think that would be totally fine to do. But I'm just confused with what he necessarily thinks that means or what it means for him to even say that. Um, but it feels a little abusive to me in a way. So about I'm culturally queer. But if you are a person who's gonna stick up for queer people, are you gonna be there in the trenches and be right there? I don't like when he said like I'm more than an ally, like I am culturally queer. Like, okay, now you're saying like you're like part. There's a line. No, just stay in the ally line. Just stay there. You're good there. Don't try to do too much to take away from what the culture is. Just love, respect it, and stick up and support that you're doing. At the end of the day, I don't have a real issue, but it has been burning on me and something I'm developing just to see like what does that mean to be culturally queer? Like I'm curious what that would mean to some of you who are watching this, and put your thoughts in the chat. And let me if this bothered you or not from him saying it, because I can see how it could bother some people and stuff with him saying it, but I'm not really sure. Are there any Secession fans out there? Well, let's see if you will be a Secession fan after this. I don't know if you saw Brian Cox in the comments that he had to say this week. One of my good friends sent it to me, and I was like, no, I hadn't seen this. Sent it to me earlier in the week, and I thought it was rather interesting. But the 77-year-old Secession actor is a self-proclaimed socialist, well known for his controversial and discourse sparking opinions. In an episode of the Starting Line podcast with Rich Lee Cox, shared more of his thoughts on religion, wealth distribution, and politics. When asked about religion holding humanity back, Cox said, oh, considerably, yes. I think religion does hold us back because its belief systems which are outside ourselves. He continues to state that, in his opinion, religion is a tool to control people. They're not dealing with who we are. We're dealing with, oh, it's God says this and God does that, and you go, well, what is God? We've created that idea of God, and we've created it as a control issue, and it's also a patriarchal issue. It's essentially patriarchal. We haven't given enough scope to matriarchy. Cox said his issues with religion mostly stem from Judeo-Christian religions, centering on patriarchal approach to life, societal, and politics. I mean, the propaganda goes right way back. The Bible is one of the worst books ever for me, from my point of view. He continued that people may need religion, but they don't need to be told lies. They need some kind of truth, and that is not the truth. It is not the truth. It is mythology, It's not really to do with what women understand more than anybody. When he called the Bible the worst book ever, I knew heads were going to roll and stuff over that then. I wanted y'all agree with Mr. Cox here? He's making some points, y'all. Like, and in my story, I used to be like really super religious, and you do buy into a lot of this, and it just kind of reshapes the way that you move within the world. But you start operating in what I deem now to be hateful ways, and like you want to disguise it, and what Bible people, what Christians and all, what they will, specifically Christians, because that's what I was, would convince themselves of is that no, they are truly loving people by telling them the truth and this and that, and all your soul, they want to see you in heaven and da 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 da. So they convince themselves that they are loving you by doing these extremely hurtful things and by saying hurtful things, and then uprooting your life, where in the end ends up being a lot of hurt for people down the road. Yeah. Now, I'm not going to put it in the worst book ever category. I think that's a little extreme, but I think if the Bible was viewed as more as some stories and things, and not this absolute truth that like has to dominate everything you do in life, I do think a lot of things would be different. A lot of hate comes from religion. I mean, yeah, there's no other way around it. A lot of hate comes from that. Not all of it is stemmed from that. And there are good parts. There are definitely good elements of religion and great teachings and things to teach you. But there is a lot of hate. And I don't think that is really not an argument. Can argue it down. And when people try to argue, they try to argue with they try to argue it with Bible verses. No, I'm telling you, that is this mind. And I lived in this world for so long. You just don't understand. Like, I lived this. So I know how your mind begins to think, and you're stuck in this element of thinking. Like this is the only way, it's the end all and be all. When we've been in this planet, us not even a dot can represent like our lives in the grand scheme of things of life and how long this planet has been here and how long people have been here. But for some reason, we think in the time period that we are born and in this little life, we have the absolute truth of all life, all of eternity, past, present, and future. How conceited and self-righteous must you be? That I used to be that way, to think you have all the answers right there. And that all the answers are in this book that's only been around for some thousand years. Y'all, it's crazy. It's crazy. But Brian Cox, he said a word with that one. He definitely said a word with that one. And I'm curious how people feel about that and are definitely reacting to that. All right, the last couple of things I want to talk about, a couple of sports stories definitely had me burning. One and from JJ Redick, former guard, long time shooting guard in the NBA. Generally viewed as very smart guy. Not gonna deny that. He has a podcast with LeBron James now. I really haven't listened to it much. I listened to clips. It seemed pretty cool with some of the stuff I've listened to. But he was recently on, and also JJ Redick is a name is being mentioned for the Lakers' possible next coach. So look out for that. But he was featured on Shaq's Bit podcast recently, and they got to talking about different eras and the greatest and stuff in all time. I'm just gonna play it. I want you to listen to what he had to say.
The only thing I don't like about the conversation is they don't put my boy's name in it. If you're going to be throwing names around, you got to have my boy's name in it. That's like saying, what are the best luxury cars out there, Lexus or a Beamer? You got to put the Mercedes in there too. Mike, LeBron, or Kobe, now y'all debate.
I refuse to get into the GOAT debate. I don't care. They didn't play against each other. What makes him great is the fact that he's done it now for 21 years at the highest level. Yeah, LeBron's never averaged 35 in a year. Guess what? He's averaged 25 or more for 20 straight years. We're nitpicking. A lot of times we're comparing eras. Like I'll say this with Michael Jordan, and I don't mean this to be controversial. Michael Jordan, during his heyday, 6 teams were added to the NBA. There were 90 players added to the NBA. Does that not water down? I'm not talking playoffs, by the way. No chance we're talking playoffs. You're not telling me that the league for a little bit is going to be a little watered down?
You know, Charles Barkley was recently on Club Shay Shay, and they had a conversation about this, in particular about old eras and the time that you played, and one of the statements that was made was just how there needs to be like this appreciation just of people who came before you. And I think that is just lost a lot of times. I think JJ does have respect, definitely respect for players who have come before him. I think there's a level of appreciating the way basketball was played in that era that is missing. Like to just dismiss Michael Jordan's era and say, wasn't that era watered down? You trying to tell me that I understand like athletes are the athleticism has changed, you know, in the NBA as a whole. But you trying to tell me at this time, in the times of Bird, Magic, I mean, Ewan, Scottie Pippen, Charles Barkley, you had just all these people, Sean Kemp, Gary Payton, just so many, Karl Malone, John Stockton. Then you got a whole Bad Boys Pistons, Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, all them boys, Dennis Rodman. Then all the greats from the Philly teams, the Celtic teams, the Laker teams, the Pistons, and all these people. You trying to say that it wasn't tough competition, that it was watered down? Do you understand what it was like to play then? Those were grown men. You wouldn't get the stuff that they call fouls today. That was a pinch back then. It's crazy. I just don't understand. Like, what were people watching, or what are they thinking about this era? It was an incredibly tough era to play in. Incredibly tough. I'm not saying this era isn't tough. It's tough in a different way. I think there's a lot more put on your body today because there are more games and stuff and more kind of expected to you. Basketball is more year round. And it's just a different approach, I think, to the game and stuff now. But you're trying to tell me in the era today when there's, G League players that get contracts and all these other things, which I'm saying I'm not saying they're not great players, but you don't think that waters down, quote unquote, competition? I don't care who was added into the NBA and stuff then. There's still NBA quality players. Like, they're just going to be great players. To make it on that level wherever you are, everyone is great. So I just don't like this use of watered down, period, because I think every era needs to be respected for what it is and the greatness that is there within that era, because there's filled with a lot of great people. And I think this is just ridiculous. And of course, he was all over LeBron trying to say, I'm not going to be in the GOAT era, blah, blah, blah. But he had nothing but praises with LeBron, and other parts of the convo too. But then when it comes to MJ, it's like, oh, yeah, but yeah, he did all this, but it was in a watered down era. Please, JJ, you may know some things, but on this, you know nothing. So just stop it. The last thing I want to talk about, your boy Patrick Beverly. He was quite the mess after the loss against the Bucks. Against the Pacers last night. And I'm gonna tell you one thing. I just cannot stand people who can not control their emotions, that are just so emotionally unstable, I guess, in ways. And I understand that you lost and that you're upset, but this was just corny to me. And I'm a play it for you, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. Let me go ahead and pull this up right here. Hold, please. There we go.
So you can't interview me then.
All right, let me.
No
Okay, well,
disrespect.
Jamal is here.
You subscribe? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna refresh so y'all catch that from the beginning.
You subscribe to my pod?
Do I subscribe to you? I do not.
So you can't interview me then. No
Okay, well,
disrespect.
Jamal is here.
You subscribe? Okay, cool.
Again, there were a couple times within a bucket or two. In previous games, y'all have been able to kind of get over that hump, or maybe. Was it anything they did in particular, or was it just one of those where the bucket didn't go down, there wasn't the stop, made one? What kind of prevented that you all from being able to get over, kind of like you have in the past?
You move that mic, please, or just get out the circle, please, for me, please, ma'am. If you're not subscribed to my pod, I appreciate it. Thank you. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Before I finish.
What a rude, what is clown? I mean, it has nothing to do with, it was a female reporter, so that's kind of becoming a deal and stuff too. Story reporter and stuff. I think with ESPN, well known. And so he proceeds to, ask her if you have subscribed to my podcast, and she's like, no. Well, Like everybody's just subscribed to your podcast. And it's like, well, if you're not subscribed to my podcast, you can't ask me no questions. Not only, and if that wasn't rude enough, so she's just being polite. I wish she would have said that to me. Being polite, she just kind of pulls her mic to the side. And so she's just going to be there to collect his sound for what he says to other reporters, which everyone does. But then he proceeds to push her mic away and then like tells her, like, can you just leave? Since you don't subscribe to my podcast, can you just leave? Are you serious? Are we having this kind of clown behavior right now? It was bad enough with you throwing the ball at that fan and stuff, being mad and stuff at the end of the game. But then to act like this after the game, it's one thing to be a jerk and to do all these things on the court. But how you behave off the court, it should never be like that, and particularly to the media. Like, they're doing their job. You lost. They're collecting a story. They have deadlines to meet. They have a job to do too, and this is part of your job. I would have a fine coming down for him because this is just disrespectful. Just completely disrespectful. And it's uncalled for to be doing this. Like, what level of professionalism do you not have? Like, how can you not be a professional in this moment? It's not that hard. So rude. This was just extremely rude. Like, it just really upsets me that how rude that this was. And I'm pissed off at the other reporters. Y'all gonna sit there and get along and get your story and not take up for your fellow colleague right there? Somebody needs to step up and say something because that was just extremely rude. Go to somebody else and get a story. It's just Pat Beverly anyway. Who cares? Hey, go talk to another player. That really pissed me off with that one. Well, Tater Tots, enjoy your weekend. Once again, make sure you catch the podcast. Be prepared next week for my Nets movie review. You'll have to see what it's going to be, but what I have plans to see on Tuesday. But until then, be well and talk to y'all later.